Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we aim to get past the headlines and really understand what's going on. Today, we're looking at something that really caught the world's eye and sparked a lot of talk. It was this huge military parade in Beijing, September 3rd, 2025. It wasn't just tanks and planes, it was a powerful piece of political theater, really. Picture this. It's the 80th anniversary of Japan's defeat in World War II. You've got aircraft flying low overhead, these massive missile launchers rolling down the avenues. But the image that stuck, the one everyone saw, was three leaders standing together. China's Xi Jinping, Russia's Vladimir Putin, and North Korea's Kim Jong Un. Front and center. Now, this wasn't just marking history. It felt like a very deliberate signal, a kind of symbolic alignment that many people immediately saw as, well, a united front of leaders often viewed as U.S. adversaries. So our mission today is to unpack that image, look at the pretty sharp political reactions that followed almost instantly. And then we need to dive deeper into the story behind one of those figures, Vladimir Putin. His long, and let's face it, controversial, time and power is really central to these bigger global shifts. Understanding his story is, I think, key to making sense of the currents affecting all of us. What really struck me was how that specific photo, plus a very dramatic comment from a major U.S. figure, this catapulted Putin right back into the headlines. Suddenly, everyone was searching his name.
You've really hit on something important there about spectacle as statecraft. These parades, they aren't spontaneous celebrations. They're planned meticulously, sometimes months, even years in advance. They're strategic communication. Every detail matters. Who stands where, who's invited, what equipment is shown. It all sends messages both inwards to their own people about strength and outwards internationally about alliances and, well, intent. That Beijing parade was a textbook example of this kind of signaling.
Absolutely. And the timing, the 80th anniversary, gave it that historical weight. But the message felt very current, didn't it? Seeing Xi, Putin, and Kim together like that, it's a powerful visual story. From like an international relations standpoint, what's the core message you think they wanted to send with that specific grouping?
Well, at the very least, it projects a shared sense of purpose. Maybe not a formal signed on the dotted line alliance, but certainly a strategic convergence. It's an image of solidarity among nations that often feel, shall we say, constrained by the current international order, especially the one led by the West. Historically, these kinds of public displays are used to gauge reactions, assert influence, maybe even subtly shift perceptions of where global power lies. It's performance, aimed at changing how things are seen and maybe how they actually are.
Right. And the optics were, undeniably strong. It creates this immediate sense of a block, a coordinated group. But we have to be careful, don't we? Optics aren't the same as proof of some formal pact.
Precisely. That's a critical distinction. It's easy to jump to conclusions based on powerful visuals. The impact is huge, and it's designed to be. But optics, as you say, are different from a documented treaty or a formal agreement. This appearance suggests coordination and definitely sets a tone, but it doesn't in itself prove a secret deal exists. It's a statement, yes, but not necessarily a signed contract. Understanding that nuance is vital.
And that line got blurred very quickly, didn't it? Especially with the reaction from the U.S. That really threw gasoline on the fire, you could say, because while the world was still processing these images, a really prominent voice in the U.S. just exploded onto the scene. Donald Trump, who was president then, reacted on his social media platform literally while the parade was happening. Real-time commentary, it just amped everything up.
Yes, that immediacy is a hallmark of modern diplomacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or perhaps anti-diplomacy sometimes. Reacting instantly via social media bypasses all the traditional, careful diplomatic language. It's direct, unfiltered, and it can frame the narrative for millions instantly.
And his words weren't subtle. They were a direct hit. He posted, and I'm quoting directly here, "May President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong Un as you conspire against the United States of America."
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a statement. Conspire against the United States. It's unambiguous. What's the strategy behind language like that, beyond just the shock? Well, it's a powerful piece of rhetorical framing. It's not just observing, it's actively shaping the interpretation. Using a word like conspire, in that sarcastic, warmest regards, immediately paints this public gathering in Beijing as hostile, as directed squarely against the U.S. It plays directly into a narrative of an adversarial alignment, which resonates strongly with a certain domestic audience, often suspicious of these particular nations. It cuts through any nuance about, complex relations or symbolic gestures and goes straight for an emotionally charged accusation. The goal seems to be controlling the perception right from the start.
It definitely solidified a particular narrative for many people, and this is where our deep dive really has to go deeper. Because that parade, Trump's reaction, It all put this intense spotlight back onto Vladimir Putin. His very long and, yes, very controversial leadership is becoming such a central piece of the global puzzle. To really get why he was there or understand Russia's actions generally, we need to look at the mechanics of how he stayed in power for so long.
Exactly. Connecting it back, Putin's longevity isn't just about him personally. It's become a structural feature of how Russia operates today, both internally and on the world stage. His leadership style, his decisions, they shape Russia's foreign policy, its internal politics, everything. So understanding his presence with Xi and Kim means understanding the, let's call it, legal and political engineering that's kept him there.
And we're talking a significant amount of time. He's been president for most of the last, what, quarter century? 2000 to 2008, then prime minister, then back as president since 2012. That's unusual for a major world leader.
It is very unusual in duration.
Yeah.
But the real controversy, the core of the debate, isn't just the number of years. It's about how those years became possible. It involves systematic changes to the Constitution, to the rules of the game, and also the conditions surrounding the elections themselves. Many analysts describe this system as a form of electoral authoritarianism, where elections happen, but the structures around them heavily favor the incumbent. That legal and political context needs a closer look.
Okay, let's unpack those rule changes, because they weren't small adjustments, were they? First, presidential terms got longer, right? From 4 years to 6. That alone is significant. But then came the really big one, the 2020 constitutional amendments.
Yes, the 2020 changes were, from a legal standpoint, quite transformative. Before that, the Russian Constitution had a clear limit, no more than 2 consecutive terms. That rule would have meant Putin couldn't run again after his term ended in 2024. But the amendments included this specific clause that essentially zeroed out his previous terms. It reset the counter, legally speaking. So it wasn't just extending the term length, it was like hitting a reset button on the constitutional clock itself, allowing him to run in 2024 and potentially stay in power well into the 2030s, assuming he keeps winning elections.
And that move, unsurprisingly, caused a huge debate. On one side, you had supporters saying, look, we need continuity, we need stability, especially with, the war, sanctions, global tensions. They framed it as needing a strong, experienced hand at the tiller during stormy seas. That's a common argument for leaders wanting to stay on, isn't it?
Absolutely. The continuity argument always surfaces in times of perceived crisis or challenge. It emphasizes stability over change. But critics, both inside Russia and internationally, saw it very differently. They viewed these constitutional changes as a blatant manipulation of the rules. Their argument is that this legal path was tailor-made to allow one person to potentially rule indefinitely, which fundamentally undermines democratic principles like term limits and the regular rotation of power. It's seen as eroding the checks and balances meant to prevent that kind of power concentration.
So a real clash over what legitimate governance even looks like, but it's not just the rules on paper, is it? It's also about the conditions under which elections actually happen. That gets just as much scrutiny.
Indeed. The process matters as much as the law. Take the 2024 presidential election. One major point of criticism was the decision not to invite established international observer groups, like the OSCE. That immediately raises flags about transparency. Independent observation is usually seen as key to building confidence in election results, both domestically and internationally.
Right. And it wasn't just the lack of observers. Lots of outside groups, human rights organizations, they were pretty direct in questioning if the election was genuinely free or fair, pointing to maybe an uneven playing field.
That's correct. And if you look at the broader context within Russia, particularly since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started in 2022, things have become much tighter for any kind of opposition or independent voice. We've seen new, very restrictive laws, arrests of critics, independent media outlets being shut down or labeled as foreign agents or undesirable. It creates a media environment where alternative viewpoints are incredibly hard to find or express.
And again, you see this split in how it's explained. Supporters say these tight controls are vital for national security, that in wartime you need to consolidate power, prevent foreign interference, keep the country united. Extraordinary times, extraordinary measures.
That's the justification often given. But critics argue that these same controls are precisely what kills real political competition. By systematically sidelining or silencing opposition figures, limiting independent journalism, restricting protests, you essentially remove meaningful choice for voters. They argue that an election held under such conditions, without genuine opposition or a public able to access diverse information, isn't really free or fair. It becomes more about legitimizing a result that was perhaps already expected rather than reflecting a genuine popular mandate.
So we pull all that together. The controversy around Putin's power isn't just about one thing. It's this mix, right? It's the legal changes, term extensions, that constitutional reset, but also the environment, the controlled elections, the pressure on opposition, the media clampdown, all happening against a backdrop of war and sanctions. It's a whole system.
That's a very good summary. It's a blend of process and context. Legal frameworks have been altered, electoral procedures are tightly managed, and the overall political and information space is restricted, all arguably working together to maintain the current leadership structure. This is why his long tenure is such a focus of international debate. It really challenges common ideas about democratic norms and how power should be transferred.
Which brings us right back to where we started and why this specific moment matters so much now. We had that powerful image, Xi, Putin, Kim in Beijing. Then the sharp U.S. reaction, President Trump's conspire comment, which really blew things up.
And it's interesting how things lined up that week, keeping Putin very much in the news. Because alongside the Beijing parade, he was also hosting the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok. He was meeting leaders and business figures from all across Asia there. It really highlighted Russia's ongoing pivot towards the East, especially given the Western sanctions. It showed him still active on the diplomatic stage, forging other connections.
So you had the military symbolism, the sharp political accusation from the U.S., and then this ongoing diplomatic activity in Asia. It's no wonder people were searching his name online, trying to figure it all out.
Exactly. Those search spikes are a clear sign of public interest, of people trying to make sense of these big, complex events. And it's important to remember that curiosity doesn't automatically mean support or agreement. It just reflects people wanting to understand the context, to connect the dots when they see these major shifts happen.
So for you listening, maybe here's a practical takeaway when you see these kinds of things unfold. Powerful images, strong statements, they grab headlines, right? But maybe keep an eye out for the follow-up. Are there formal joint statements, signed agreements, concrete policy changes? Those often tell a deeper story than the initial photo op.
That's a great point. Photos and rhetoric shape perception. They signal intent, they frame narratives. But the actual nuts and bolts of international relations often lie in those formal documents, those tangible actions. Distinguishing between the symbolic and the substantive is really key.
Okay, so let's wrap up this deep dive. We started with that really striking image, Xi, Putin, Kim together in Beijing. We saw how quickly it sparked a fiery reaction from the U.S. And then we went under the surface, looking at the long and frankly much debated story of Vladimir Putin's time in power, shaped by those big constitutional changes and elections held under very specific controlled conditions.
And understanding that background, the internal dynamics, is crucial for making sense of Russia's role on the world stage today, including its relationships with countries like China and North Korea. It shows how domestic politics and international relations are deeply intertwined.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, something maybe to chew on. We see how powerful these striking images and sharp sound bites can be. They grab our attention, they shape narratives almost instantly. What does that tell us about how we consume news and understand global politics in this incredibly fast-paced world? How much power do these visual moments and strong words actually hold in shaping our perception of alliances and conflicts, maybe even more than the formal agreements signed behind closed doors? Something to think about. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and stay informed.